Rome was the most powerful and influential city in Europe for centuries. But how did the Goths break it? Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today, we're going to be answering the history question of the day, which is how did the Goths break the Roman Empire? Make sure to leave your answers in the comments section below, and we'll see who's right. As always, you can find the question of the day in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. The Goths were actually pretty instrumental in the fall of the Western Roman Empire, but they weren't the only ones. The Visigoths, or West Goths, were a Germanic people who lived just north of the Roman Empire in the 3rd century AD. Their name is thought to derive from Goth, meaning people or nation. And it's possible that they named themselves after a chief named Goths, or Goita, but historians aren't entirely certain. What we do know is that the Goths were originally a loose confederation of tribes that spoke similar, but not identical languages and shared cultural similarities. By the early 4th century, they were united under one king and had absorbed neighboring tribes into their fold. In fact, by the time the Western Roman Empire fell, the Gothic people would stretch from the mouth of the Danube River in the north to North Africa in the south. And while they were mostly known for their fierce warriors, the Goths were also known for their incredible art and their ability to adapt. For example, when the Romans developed a taste for garish purple dyes, the Goths simply started dyeing their hair purple. But despite their adaptability, the Goths would end up doing the Romans no favor. For much of the 3rd century, the Goths remained largely isolated in their home territory. But when the Roman Emperor Carus marched his army north to conquer them, he ended up having second thoughts. Not only were the Goths fierce fighters, but they were also excellent horsemen, and there were simply too many of them for Rome to absorb. So instead of subjecting them, he made a deal with their king Rashir, granting the Goths full Roman citizenship and allowing them to keep their wealth and property. In exchange, the Goths would provide Rome with military support. It sounds like a great deal, right? Well, yeah. But about 30 years later, the Romans broke the treaty. Emperor Valens needed troops to fight off the Persians, and he looked to the Goths to fulfill that need. But instead of calling for volunteers, he simply took what he needed, including men, women, and children. This act alone would sow the seeds of resentment that would eventually lead to the sack of Rome. Still, it would take another 60 years for the Goths to get their revenge. And by then, Rome wouldn't look or function the same ever again. In 410 AD, a Gothic king named Alaric marched his army into the city. It wasn't the first time Rome had been sacked, and it wouldn't be the last. But this event marked the beginning of the end for Rome. The once invincible city had been brought to its knees by a group of people it once called friends. And while the sack of Rome by the Goths was a significant event in both Gothic and Roman history, it wasn't the end for either. After plundering the city for 3 days, Alaric and his men left Rome relatively unharmed and moved on to other conquests. He died in 418 or 419. And the Visigoths would go on to establish a kingdom in southwestern France in 418. They'd even come to a collective agreement with Rome that allowed them to keep the spoils of war. And though the empire would continue to fracture and crumble, the Goths would eventually adopt Roman customs and traditions, becoming one of the most powerful states in medieval Europe. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to help out the channel, you can do so through the links in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching.